Hi, everyone. It looks like we're still waiting on a few registered attendees to join tonight's session, so we're actually going to wait an extra couple of minutes and hope to get started at about 6:35. Thanks. Okay, again, welcome everyone, and thank you for taking the time to join the City of Kingston's online engagement session for the Animal Bylaw review. My name is Mark Nardi. I'm a communications officer with the city's Department of Communications and Public Engagement, and I'm going to be moderating this online engagement session. I'm joined tonight with some staff from the licensing and enforcement team. So we have Derek O'Shea, licensing and enforcement coordinator with the city, Dan Hazel and John Baldwin, supervisors of licensing and enforcement, as well as Kyle Compo, manager of licensing and enforcement. It looks like we currently have about 21 registered attendees joining us, and we have an expected 35 who may be joining throughout. Please note that this session is live streamed on YouTube and is being recorded. So to protect all of your privacy, all participants have had their video turned off and have been muted. The chat functionality in Zoom has also been turned off. Next slide, please. So sometimes technology troubles happen, and there are a list of common challenges on Get Involved Kingston, including if your audio or video isn't working. You can view them at getinvolved.cityofkingston.ca. You can also adjust your options so that you can see both the presentation and the members of the project team at the same time in Zoom. And if your internet connection goes down at any point in time, you can call into the meeting using the number on the screen. I suggest that you write it down just in case. You can also follow live on the city's YouTube channel. We will do our best to help you with any technical problems, but sometimes the easiest way to resolve issues is just to log out of Zoom and rejoin the meeting. And you can do so using the registration confirmation email that you would have received. Next slide, please. If you have a question at any point during the session, please use the Q&A feature. We'll be collecting questions and answering them during the Q&A period at the end of the presentation. Following the presentation, there will be an additional option for you to raise your hand and ask a question verbally. The Q&A feature can be found on the bottom bar of the screen there. To ask a question, simply press that button and type into the question area. When the question comes in, the project team will respond to your question. Please note that if we don't get to all of the questions and answers will be summarized by the project team and posted on the project page on Get Involved Kingston. And if you have a question or comment following the presentation and would like to speak, please use the raised hand function. That can be found by following the following steps. So click Q&A, a pop-up should appear, and there are multiple options. Just choose raise hand. In this case, I will be monitoring and I will acknowledge you and ask you to turn on your microphone so that you can ask a question or make a comment. Next slide. So the guidelines for participation are now on the screen. I'd like to ask all individuals joining us if there is anything additional that you as session attendees would like to see added to the guidelines for this engagement session. To confirm that everyone agrees, we ask that anyone who is not in agreement to raise their hands using the raise hand function, as I mentioned on the last page. Okay, so we do have one raised hand from an individual. Deanna, you can either send me a message. I noticed your raised hand went up before I asked about this. Just send me a message and confirm if you do have a question about the guidelines for participation or not. Otherwise, seeing no other hands or objections to the guidelines for participation, we'll proceed on to the online engagement session. Okay, great. So our agenda here, as you can see, we were scheduled to start at about 6:30, so we're 5 minutes late to the start. We're going to have a presentation of the survey findings and stakeholder engagement presented by Derek, followed by a Q&A period with licensing and enforcement staff and a comment period. And at 7:55 p.m., we hope to wrap up. And now I'm going to pass things over to Derek for the presentation.
Good evening, excuse me, good evening, everybody. I'm Derek O'Shea. I'm the Licensing and Enforcement Coordinator with the City of Kingston. And for about the next 15 to 20 minutes, I'll be taking you through the results of our survey and the engagement we've done with stakeholders over the last several weeks. So seeing from the participants list, I think I've had a chance to either speak with many of you via online meetings or via email. The survey, which I'm assuming hopefully most of you completed, was available between November 9th and 30th. We had over 1,200 responses to the survey, which was a really great response. We're very pleased with that amount. We also, myself, held 14 individual meetings with different stakeholder groups. We met with many different groups that are involved in the area of animal welfare and responsible pet ownership. So this includes groups like the Kingston Humane Society, the city's trap, neuter, vaccinate, and return operators, the CRCA, the Frontenac Federation of Agriculture, and the city's Rural Advisory Committee, and the Kingston Area Responsible Pet Ownership Group as well. So we've been doing as much work as we can to meet with the experts and people with knowledge in this field so we can help build up our knowledge base as we go forward with our updates to the bylaw. So without further ado, I'll go into the survey results. Now, if you recall the survey at the start, we had some demographic questions to kind of give us an understanding of the people that were responding to the survey. So over 80% of those who filled out the survey were a pet owner. Not surprisingly, the majority were cat and dog owners, but we do have some other pet owners outside of the more traditional ones. 80% of the respondents also agreed or strongly agreed that pet ownership was a privilege. In terms of, we had a couple of questions about the importance of registration or licensing for cats and dogs. There, the responses were really split. It was almost split evenly amongst people who agreed that it was important versus those who thought it was less important or not important. And then lastly, we had a question about dogs on leashes, which we had 80% of people strongly agreed or agreed that dogs should be leashed when they're not on the property's owner, or not on their owner's property. So this gives us an idea of the type of responses we had and the people who were responding. So it allows us to put some context to the next few slides we're going to show, which are the actual survey question responses. So pet limits was one of probably the biggest topic we dealt with in terms of had the largest number of response from our public engagement with our stakeholders, as well as the engagement with, in terms of comments on the survey itself. So first question we asked was about the limit, potential limit on the number of dogs per residence. And here you can see about 60% of survey respondents were in favor. Now, if you answered yes to this question, you were given a follow-up question which asked what you felt was a suitable limit for the number of dogs per residence. And on this graph, you can see the answers clustered around the 2 to 4 limit were sort of the most popular, and that most of the respondents felt that was an appropriate limit, which is in line with what we've seen with other municipalities that have pet limits on dogs or limits on dogs. So we also asked if the city should limit the number of cats per residence. And this one, we had a similar response in that many people felt that there should be a limit on the number of cats per residence. It was around 62% of people who were in favor. And much like the question about limits on dogs, we asked what a suitable limit would be for number of cats per residence. And again, this clustered heavily around the 2 to 4 range. So this gives us a good sense of where pet limits would be, numbers that would be suitable if we were to pursue that. Now, we also had a third question which asked if there would be support for a limit on the total number of pets in a household. So this would be regardless of species. And this we found there was a lot less support than specific limits on species such as dogs and cats. So here you can see the support was less than 50%. So that was just an interesting way and shows that if there's any support for limits, it's more species specific as opposed to generic. Now, we did get a lot of feedback on what people thought about pet limits. There were a lot of concerns expressed, such as a limit could lead to an increase in abandonment or surrender of pets because people would not want to be in contravention to the limit. There was also a feeling that it punishes people who are good pet owners who may have a large number of pets, and that a limit on the number of pets does not necessarily ensure that proper care is met. So those were good points that were brought up. There were also concerns around exemptions for certain groups, such as the city's rescue agencies and their foster homes. Would they be exempt from any limits because they may have more than any potential limit just on a temporary basis? And there was also a concern or comments made that pet limits should not really be considered until Kingston has a high volume, low cost spay-neuter clinic running. So as I said to many people who brought that up, there is some value and there is some connection with a high volume, low cost spay-neuter clinic and the Animal Bylaw, but the Animal Bylaw itself will not be addressing that. It's more on the sort of the control and encouraging responsible pet ownership as part of a bylaw. Now, we also, other comments on pet limits were that it could potentially lead to a decrease in pet registration because people do not want to be showing that they might be in violation by having a larger number of pets than are allowed. And lastly, that there was no sort of conclusive link between pet limits and encouraging responsible pet ownership, that there was no connection or correlation there. And lastly, a comment we received a lot of through the survey was that if pet limits were considered, it should be relative to the size of property or home in which the pets are being housed, which, to be honest, we had not seen in any of the bylaws that we had reviewed that use pet limits. So that was a very unique response, but there were definitely more than a few people who came up with that. Now, the next question we asked, which it appears very long, but the basic question was, should the city, municipal law enforcement, or bylaw officers be able to enforce standards of care for pets? So, such as making sure pets and animals are provided adequate food, water, shelter, and veterinary care. As you can see here, and it's not surprising, the grand majority of people were in favor of adding some type of standards of care to our bylaw. There were a few people who felt that, around a quarter of the respondents, that this should continue to be dealt with through the provincial legislation that deals with animal welfare. Now, some comments we received here as well is that any type of enforcement of this would require special training for our officers to ensure they know what the standards of care are and that they are enforced consistently. And that comment was made too, is that it can be very difficult to determine what type of appropriate medical care is required for an animal. So again, a need for specialized training. And then there were just comments surrounding the current legislation that the province has through the Provincial Animal Welfare Services Act, also known as PAWS, saying that we should work to ensure that those provincial standards are enforced. So those were some good comments in that area. The next question revolved around the idea of dangerous dogs. So this was about, should the city have the ability through complaint, investigation, and confirmation to deem a dog potentially dangerous or dangerous? We'll get a bit more into what the consequences of this are in the following slides, but around 2/3 of people were in favor of having this sort of dangerous dog regulations within the bylaw. Now, a key part to the dangerous dog designation is that a municipal law enforcement officer would be able to make orders to either help protect the public from that animal or to ensure that a dangerous dog would not be a danger to the public. So a follow-up question, if you voted in support of that, was what would you support as these type of orders? So there was greater support for muzzling of the dog, ensuring there's signage on the property that the dog resides at, indicating a dangerous dog lives there, and for the owner to carry liability insurance. There was less support for orders that would require the animal to be spayed or neutered, to be microchipped, or for there to be additional registration or licensing fees. It's also worth noting that 153 respondents felt that no corrective order should be issued for a potentially dangerous dog. And I think by that is only if a dog has attacked or bitten should there be any type of order undertaken. And some comments we received in this, there were two general themes. One, that there needs to be a peculiar awareness of mitigating circumstances that may cause a dog to attack, that there may be things that led the dog to be provoked. And there were also concerns that one instance shouldn't have a dog being labeled as dangerous for the rest of their lives, especially if it is a one-off incident. And then the other comments we received too were that there's certain trainings and skills that are required to determine if a dog is dangerous, certain training in animal behavior that staff may not have. So those were some comments that we're going to be, taking into consideration moving forward. So now we're moving into sort of away from dog specific into support for the addition of exotic pet regulation. So in Kingston, there currently are no regulations restricting the ownership of exotic pets. In fact, provincially, there's actually no regulations here. The only animal bans are for pit bulls and orca whales, of all things. So in response to this question, the majority of survey respondents indicated that they would support either a total ban or a prohibition of most species with certain exemptions, and they're noted on, an example of the exemption, it was noted on the survey. Now in here, comments we heard were that there should be prohibitions included that prevent the breeding of these exotic species. One that was brought up too that was really important is that if people are found with prohibited animals, that we should ensure that they're surrendered properly, that they're not released into the wild or killed. So that's an important consideration. And lastly, there were comments about agricultural uses where there may be sort of non-traditional livestock animals such as ostrich and emu, if they would be considered a prohibited species under this. In the end, any of the regulations on exotic species would be about maintaining public safety and ensuring that there's not animals being kept in conditions that are not appropriate for them. So back towards a more dog-focused question around tethering of animals in public spaces, such as outside of businesses. So should there be rules introduced in this area? There was about only 1/3 of people were in actual favor of this. 45% were not in favor and 21% were unsure. So it was very split on this question. A follow-up question that was asked would be sort of what would be the process if we did introduce regulations, and more of the respondents preferred either tickets only given after warning and education, or just strictly education and placing a warning on file. Now, the purpose of the asking this question is to help prevent situations where animals are either tethered outside where they pose a hazard to the public, or their safety is jeopardized by where they're tethered, or, as has been noted on here, in extreme weather situations such as extreme cold or extremely hot temperatures. Now, a comment was also made to that introducing tethering regulations may have the unintended consequence of people leaving their animals in cars, which we all know leaving pets in hot cars is not a good thing. So also on the leash topic here, we asked a question about reasonable leash lengths. So this one, again, there's kind of a split response on this. Over a third of respondents felt that there should be no maximum leash length as long as the person can maintain care and control. And amongst those who did support a maximum leash length, most of the support was at the shorter length of 6 feet, and then the support dropped as it went to a longer leash length. And then a small amount thought leashes should not be required at all. Now, I'm just going to jump back here too. We did get one comment through the survey fairly frequently, was concerns about the use of retractable leashes and the hazards they pose as well. Some people were requesting that they be banned entirely. So we have 2 more survey questions to go through. Our second last one is regarding the question about the support for the addition of regulations which would limit the feeding of wildlife. Around 60% of respondents were in favor of some type of regulation here. The initial guiding principle behind this was to help avoid nuisance or pest situations where large amounts of feed is left outside, or animal food such as spilled from bird seed, or just has been left out that is attracting pests such as rats or pigeons. Comments that were made here were that exemptions should be made or considered for people who are hunting or trapping on private property. And in our conversations with the Sandy Pines Wildlife Center, it was noted that the feeding of birds in winter conditions is actually beneficial to bird health, as their natural food sources are severely limited. And the last slide concerning our survey questions was regarding support for the addition of pigeon keeping regulations in Kingston. So Kingston currently has no regulations regarding the keeping of racing or homing pigeons. Many municipalities, I was surprised to learn, do have those. They typically limit the number of birds, the location of lofts, flight times, and those things. So there was around 57% of people were in favor of adding some type of regulation. We did receive a number of comments through the survey that some people were in favor of a complete ban on pigeon ownership. As far as we can tell through our research, this issue is fairly small in number, in that there are only a handful of people who own pigeons in Kingston, but we do understand that the concerns of those who are in proximity are significant. So that's one of our challenges moving forward. So I'm on to my last slide here in terms of the results of the survey. And these were some of the comments we heard that maybe weren't questions, but that we received a significant number of comments on. So the first one was regarding cats being at large, and that a lot of people would like to see rules preventing them from being at large. There's primarily concerns for outdoor cats and the killing of songbirds and other small native animals, as well as nuisance situations such as leaving feces in gardens and such things. There were also a lot of comments requesting better enforcement of the existing bylaws, specifically any poop and scoop laws, as well as making sure dogs are under care and control of their owner. We also received a few comments that it's important that the bylaw recognizes the distinction between domestic and agricultural and work animals, and how animals are perhaps used in the rural area of the cities, different from pets in the urban area. And lastly, there were comments regarding tethering of animals in extreme weather, as well as asking for consideration for a maximum time that animals would be allowed to be tethered outside. And we have seen a few other bylaws that do set out specific times, that maximum times that animals can be tethered. So with that, those are the results of the survey and the public engagement. We did have to go through that fairly quickly. So as I'm turning things over to our host, we'll be happy to answer any questions and perhaps expand upon any of the information we shared.
Thanks, Derek. Okay, so we're entering the question and answer period now. So this will run from 6:55 to 7:20. So again, any attendees are welcome to ask questions relating to the animal bylaw. So you can use the Q&A feature or the raise hand features, either one. And again, the Q&A is just located in the bottom bar there of the Zoom window. Questions that haven't been addressed by the end of the engagement will be addressed in the reporting out. And if you have a question that you don't want addressed as part of this Q&A, but you would like to speak to staff about, you can email that either directly to our licensing and enforcement coordinator, Derek O'Shea, and his email is up here on the slide, or you can post them on the Animal Bylaw Get Involved page, which will stay open after this engagement. With that in mind, I see that we have one question in the Q&A box and we have an individual who's raised their hand. So, and before we do get into the question and answer period, after 7:20, we will move into a comment period where you'll have 2 minutes to share comments with staff. So bear that in mind. This will just be for additional questions on the presentation. So our first question is from Mary. So she's asking, when people are asked questions about whether they support pet limits, do you understand that most respondents will not know that the research does not support limits? Will you present that information to the public? So since this actually has to do with the survey specifically, I'm going to see if Derek would like to reply to that, or Dan. Not really sure who'd want to address that.
I can answer that one, Mark. Thank you for the question, Mary. Yeah, that's very important. So we will be doing, and you'll see some more information on this as we wrap up the evening tonight, that we are going to be doing more reporting out on the Get Involved page, and we'll be certain to include our findings with regards to pet limits, the concerns that were expressed, and the research that we've been able to undergo. We didn't want to include information that might lead people in one direction or another as part of the survey. So, but I definitely have discovered that that research link just isn't there. So I really do appreciate that comment, and we will make sure that it is included in our reporting out. Thank you.
Okay, now I'm going to switch to Paige here, who's, we have a raised hand. So you should be allowed to unmute yourself and share your comments. So whenever you're ready, Paige, or sorry, your question, I should say.
Hey there, can you guys hear me?
Yep, we can.
Okay, super. You know, my question more pertains to what exactly is the city going to be doing with regards to pet overpopulation? I know that it's a bit of a, there's a correlation with pet overpopulation and then being able to focus on quick action and affordable spay-neuter clinics to address the heart of the issue. I feel that limiting the number of animals that an individual owns doesn't really address the major problem, which again is pet overpopulation. So in conjunction with this, is the city also, besides the vouchers that the city already has in place, are there any other considerations for dealing directly with the pet overpopulation and also enabling the owners that, you know, truth be told, are quite honestly going to be, like the survey indicated, resistant to you know, being accurate with the number of animals that are within their household, again, because it comes down to a financial issue.
Okay, thanks very much for that. So Dan, would you be willing to address that?
Sure, Mark. Thanks very much for your questions and comments page. I really appreciate it. So currently the only mechanisms within our current bylaw that allow us to regulate that type of an issue is our registration program, as the current bylaw does not place any pet limits or limitations on the amount of pets that you can own. Currently, the only avenues that the city currently has is two programs that we're aware of. One is the TVNR program, which allocates $25,000 annually. And then by way of a contract, we have services that go out there and look at trapping community cats in an effort to control our pet population. And the second one you've already touched on is our voucher program, which is another $25,000 that we provide to have people that are eligible for vouchers that can receive spayed and neuter free of charge.
Right.
So essentially, right now we're using those two programs to try to manage the pet population. And in addition to that, it's the current registration of animals, ensuring that animals are registered in accordance with the bylaw. As part of this process, we're not looking to add a low-cost spay and neuter initiative at this time. It is something that has come up, and I believe it's a better discussion that the city, the CARPO, Kingston Humane Society could probably have in a joint format to really discuss the feasibility of enacting some sort of program aside from or in conjunction with the animal bylaw. We have had some discussions on it previously, as it has come up a couple of times. I think it is a great avenue and a great potential for the future. There's some clear benefits that's been shown in other communities to a low-cost, high-volume spayed and neutered initiative, and it's some definitely information that Derek and I can outsource and look at and provide some more information on potential next steps on the Get Involved page at a later time.
Absolutely. May I make another, well, I don't want to say comment, because I think that you guys mentioned that the comments would be at the end of this, and I'm happy to sort of delay my comment for that section of the Zoom.
Whatever works for you, Paige.
Okay. Again, my concern would be just to ensure that the left hand knows what the right hand's doing, and again, going back to limit laws, you know, they're again being extremely difficult to enforce, and actually, you know what, I'd like to maybe backpedal for a second. I'd like to introduce myself just a little bit in that two factors actually. One, I volunteer and I sit on the board with Spay Neuter Kingston Initiative. And so as a rescue and animal welfare charity, you know, we're certainly looking at the proposals that have been submitted, you know, with quite a bit of interest, because it directly impacts our ability, you know, to support and rescue and also do all of the services within your TNBR voucher, although we've taken a step back and we're focusing on our established colonies at this point. But another aspect of this is that I'm actually quite concerned as an animal owner and you know, and with the animals that I have under my own care, and also as a kennel owner within the city limits, right? So everything that's being proposed within here directly impacts, you know, me and how I will be able to ensure that I'm actually, you know, being in compliance and being a responsible citizen. So the limit laws, of course, are of extreme interest to my person as well. So I think that at the end of the day, you know, we also need to focus, besides limit laws, also, you know, keeping in mind that if we're not providing a direct solution for pet overpopulation, limiting what would be irresponsible pet ownership isn't the solution or the only solution. I think that if we're going to be responsible, we have to be able to, you know, implement something like this in conjunction with other affordable spay neuter services and other supportive avenues for the general population.
Thanks very much for your comment, Paige. Sorry, Dan. Just wanted to jump in here because we do have a few more questions piling up. Paige, if you have any follow-ups to this, what we'll do is we'll actually go into the comment period, and then we'll have a chance for you to leave additional comments. The reason being, just I want to make sure that we explain our process for anonymous comments and how we'll be reporting out on them.
Absolutely.
We also have 2 or 3 comments here, and I just want to make sure that everyone's got a chance to address their comments while they're fresh in their minds. So thank you very much for the comments in the page, in the question page.
Thank you.
Okay, so it looks like our next question is again another comment from or question, sorry, from Zabe. So I've gone ahead and unmuted you, so you can go right ahead.
So you can hear me?
Yep.
I'm just would like some, to me, the bylaws and what's being kind of proposed is very biased. And there's just, every time I walk to work, there's like free range cats, and I don't see how the cat situation, people just letting them outside, you know, the dogs are on leashes, there's people concerned about that health, but the cats that are out and the population of feral cats, and the fact I don't think like the documentation out there does not support the protecting birds with the amount of cats and the spade neuter release kind of programs just are not helpful. So I'm curious, when will the city ask questions or create a regulations that educate and limit those things that allow cats to be outside? It's so vaguely worded on the, you know, that cats can't be allowed out on other people's property, but that's it. There's never talk about the only way to prevent them from going on other people's property is leashes. And so I'm just curious if somebody can address that. And to what degree people are following some of the research out there, you know, by the authors of the Cat War book.
Thank you very much for your question and comments. So in terms of what potential regulations that we are going to put forth in the animal bylaw, nothing's been decided upon yet. We're currently in the receiving the survey results and the general information before we make the next step of making those decisions. As it speaks to cats, in our current animal bylaw, the only violation as it pertains to cats are prohibited from trespassing and only in the urban area. As part of our animal bylaw update, we are looking at potentially adding the regulation for cat trespassing and being at large, which by definition would then apply to city property as well. We basically wanted to get feedback from the community through the survey and through our stakeholders on their opinion on that matter. And it seems that based on the survey results, that there is a lot of support for adding the addition for cats to be at large as well as trespassing. As part of that component, we would then, at the launch of the animal bylaw, would do some education and updates to our community and through our stakeholders to make sure that everyone's aware that cats would potentially be in violation if they were at large as well. So that might allow the enforcement division another mechanism or tool, so to speak, to follow up with cats that are not on private property as well, such as cats that are roaming the street or cats that are going into a city park, for example, and potentially attacking and injuring birds at that level. So we are considering, if you have any additional feedback or any research you want to pass our way associated with your comments, feel free to email Derek O'Shea that information. We'd be happy to look at it further. And if we have any follow-up questions, we definitely reach out to you.
Thanks very much. So again, we're going to actually proceed to some of the typed up questions now. After you leave a voice question, what I'm going to do is you'll be muted and then we'll lower your hand. And then if you have an additional comment or question that I should say, if you have an additional question you'd like to ask, you can go ahead and raise your hand after. So our next question is from Dana. She's asking, did the results of the survey reflect the opinions of the stakeholders that were consulted individually?
All right, I'm happy, excuse me, I'm happy to answer that question, Mark. So the stakeholders were encouraged to fill out the survey as well. And what we've presented here tonight is a combination of the results of the survey as well as the comments we've received directly from the stakeholders. I know many of the stakeholders I met with are in the room, and I'm really hoping I did accurately capture their comments. So they're presented in that format. Hopefully I was able to accurately bring everything together tonight, and we'll be bringing it all together as we work on updating the bylaw. So hopefully that answers your question, Dana.
Okay, and the next question would be from Allison. Have you consulted with other municipalities that have household pet limits? If so, are the bylaws effective in these cities? How do the bylaws improve animal welfare?
All right, I think that one's to me again. So Allison, happy to answer this for you. So I have been in correspondence with other municipalities that do have pet limits in place. In a couple of cases, the responses I've gotten is that there is no direct link in terms of their effectiveness. A lot of municipalities don't have direct data, and that goes to my earlier comments that pet limits haven't been proven to conclusively improve animal welfare. There's anecdotal evidence that it may prevent issues with hoarding, but I've also heard things from groups that because hoarding is a difficult mental illness, people would be doing that regardless of bylaws. Plus, we also do have animal welfare regulations within provincial regulations. The interesting thing I've found actually in terms of pet limits when speaking with other municipalities is that in many cases they were instituted for political reasons. It wasn't necessarily staff's recommendation or the recommendation of responsible pet ownership groups, but politically motivated. So we've been doing our research on that, and hopefully that will bear out in our final reports and recommendations. So hopefully that answers your question, Allison.
Okay, great. And we now have a raised hand from Councillor Osanek. So we've gone ahead and unmuted. So please go ahead.
Thanks very much, you guys. Thanks so much. I was still trying to type how to word the question and everything. So the one question I was just trying to type up was just listening about cats at large. And yeah, one of my neighbors, they let their cats out, and I really like chipmunks, and their cat always comes over and eats my chipmunks. And I don't like that. I love cats. I have like 5 cats myself, but I don't want to have the chipmunks eaten. And so if we did go ahead and try to find people that had cats at large roaming the neighborhood, does that mean that the owner would just get a fine, or what would happen to the cat? Like, we're not saying that the cat then gets trapped and gets brought into the pound, are we? If that's what we're going to look at maybe proposing.
Thank you for your question, Councillor O'Sonic. Always appreciate it. What we would be doing with this type of regulation would be following some of our standard operating practices for animal control enforcement. If we were able to identify the cat's owner, hopefully the cat would be registered and had a cat tag or a microchip on it, which would allow us to quickly identify who that is. For our first visit for that type of a situation, we would always provide education of the bylaw and allow that cat owner or dog owner to comply with that regulation in the bylaw. So that's usually our first step. If we continue to see repeat cases of the cat being at large or trespassing, then the officers would have the discretion after education has been completed to issue a warning, an official warning that would get logged in the city's enforcement management system.
Okay.
And after that pattern of behavior continued on after a warning, the officers would have discretion to issue the cat's owner a potential provincial offense notice and or administrative monetary penalty notice.
Okay.
So our standard operating practice would not be to take that cat to the Humane Society and enter it through an impound. Essentially, we would like to, through responsible pet ownership education, make the cat owner aware of their responsibilities, the legislation in effect, in hopes that they would just comply or find an alternative manner to let their cat at large, so to speak.
And if I may just add to that, Dan's comments there as well, I think the theme we've gotten in terms of cats at large too is that there'd be an important component of education here as well. And with that, educating residents on the fact that there are these regulations and perhaps why it is important for people to make sure that their cats do stay on their property if we go that way, because of, as people have mentioned here, the threat to songbirds, the threat to other native wildlife species. In my research, I've learned that cats, and it's surprising but not surprising, that they are an invasive species in this area. They are not native to Canada. And yeah, so education would be a big component of that as well.
So recognizing that we have about 7 or 8 minutes left in the Q&A, we're going to move to some of the typed up questions here. So our next question is from Eden. Will this law take into account multi-owner and or multi-family houses? Suppose 2 families share a house and their pets exceed the limit currently, or cumulatively, sorry, exceed the limit cumulatively. Will the limit be based on households, individual, etc.?
I can answer that question, Mark. Thank you, Eden, for the question. I'll just again go back to, at this point, nothing has been decided in terms of the bylaw, so we're still gathering feedback on whether or not we should pursue pet limits. So I would say this is a very important comment and something we would need to consider, that if we do pursue going down pet limits, one of the issues we'd have to consider in terms of enforcement are those multifamily households. So I can't give you an answer because we haven't worked out that, and there's no guarantee that we will be pursuing pet limits, but I appreciate that comment and we'll use that as we go forward determining if we do institute pet limits.
Okay, and our next question is from Jason, who says, I was a member of CARPO who was on a call with the city during the consultation process. Will the city of Kingston clearly state in their next report or summary that the Kingston Advocates for Responsible Pet Ownership group that participated on a phone meeting with the city was 100% against a pet limit on domestic dogs and cats? I think that is important, since it includes many of the local rescue groups and the Humane Society.
I can
go ahead and answer that one as well, since I was on that call with Jason. And I think I told you, Jason, on that call there that I had definitely gotten the flavor of the discussion and know that CARPO is definitely against a pet limit. And I can commit that in our reporting out document from this session, as well as any reports we have going forward, we will recognize CARPO's opposition 100% against pet limits.
Okay, and our next question is from Shannon. I'm curious if any of the local vets were spoken to as stakeholders regarding multi-pet owners and the care their clients give to their pets.
Okay, so I believe that's another question for me. We did reach out through letter mail to the veterinary clinics in Kingston. At this point, I have not heard from any of them, but if there are veterinary clinics or veterinarians that would like to provide their feedback, I'm more than happy to hear that. hopefully you can appreciate in these pandemic times, it is difficult and not necessarily the ability of staff to go door to door and seek out groups. So Shannon, if you know of any veterinarians or veterinary clinics that would like to reach out and share their perspective, please share with them my email contact. I believe we may have actually been in contact, you and I, regarding the survey as well. So if you have further comments, please do not hesitate to email me.
Okay, next question is from Dana. The inclusion of pigeon, the inclusion of the pigeon question is interesting, as it seems like a very small group of people who would have them. I can't imagine the smell and disruption it would cause for neighbors, not to mention the rats it would bring in. What is currently happening with people with a pigeon farm in the city? And does this fall under the chicken bylaw, i.e. the max number of 6? Would chickens and pigeons be included in the pet limit if there is a limit?
Thank you for your question, Dana. So currently the animal bylaw, as it's currently prescribed, does not cover the keeping of pigeons. So essentially it's not a violation to keep pigeons under the animal bylaw. In addition to that, in a residential property under the city's zoning bylaws, it is deemed a lawful accessory to have pigeons on a residential zone property. We have hens covered in the city's animal bylaw currently with a restriction of a maximum of 6. And pigeons is currently not included in that definition or scope of the hen coops.
Okay. So our next question is from Jason. Could you explain the next steps, i.e. bylaw goes to committee, et cetera? So Jason, we actually do have a slide that speaks to that. So in the interest of concluding the Q&A in the kind of time limit, I'm going to skip your question. And if you do have additional questions, if the slide doesn't adequately explain the next steps, feel free to follow up and we can answer that for you. So with that in mind, I'll go to the question from Chelsea. I'm wondering how the city ensures that these kinds of surveys reach marginalized groups in our community. Derek, did you want to speak to that?
Yep. Yeah, I most certainly can speak to that. So thank you for the question, Chelsea. And perhaps our moderator, who's also our communications officer, can help supplement some of these responses here. But the survey was made available through the city website. We did conduct advertising through a variety of means, such as social media, as well as we had some physical advertising signs, Curbex signs, I believe they're called, so out in the community. I believe it was also distributed through the city's Get Involved mailing list as well. And there was postings on the city's social media as well as paid advertising. I don't think there was not any specific work to reach marginalized communities. And unfortunately, I know marginalized communities can be a very vague term. So perhaps we could discuss this more offline if you would like to send me an email. I'm sorry that I can't provide too many more details. I don't know if Mark, I missed anything in terms of our communications plan there.
Okay, that's great, Derek. Yeah, if you'd like to follow up at any point in time, we're happy to provide more information. From a communication standpoint, the city is, we do try and make efforts to reach as broad an audience as possible and specific subsets of the population that maybe would have something to say. In this particular case, as Derek mentioned, we had 3 large print billboards that were located. One was on a rural arterial, and we did also use social media with paid advertising. So in the pandemic times, it is obviously a challenging time for communications, but we try and ensure that we are trying to expand our reach outside of just what could be considered a regular audience. If you'd like to follow up with Derek at any point in time, more information can be provided about that. So I'm going to move on to the question from Kendra. Would there be consequences for people dumping their pets? Dan, could you speak to that?
Kendra, thank you very much for your comment and question. So currently, this animals bylaw does not have any pet abandonment or pet dumping regulations or violations within it. When staff identify a situation where an animal was abandoned or dumped, we refer those calls to the Provincial Animal Welfare Service, cutely named PAWS, for assistance and for review and follow-up. We could consider adding a regulation or violation for the abandonment or dumping of pets within the animal bylaw. And that's something that Derek and I have looked at across other municipalities that do have that in play. And we will definitely put that in the to-do list and consider adding that regulation as well. And we'll make mention of it in our upcoming public or Get Involved page, any updates, and in the report that's coming down the pipe in relation to the animal bylaw update. Thank you very much for your comment.
Okay, so recognizing that it's 7:20 here, what I'll do is we'll address Richard's question, and then noticing that there's another additional question from Paige here, we'll move into the comment period, and if there's surplus time at the end, we'll return. Again, any questions that we don't address as part of this will be included in the reporting out. So just bear that in mind. Okay, so Richard's asking, throughout the years of dealing with bylaw officers and other law enforcement officers, there is some confusion as to what is needed when dealing with problem pets. Also, what info that is needed for the enforcement of the laws, such as length of barking dogs. How long is to when barking. So I've been told 3 or 4 times that just the other day, a whole new set of rules. So when will you have a set of rules that is up to date and all residents have access to them? And will the need, will the updates be met in these, or will the updates meet these needs? Sorry, my apologies.
Thank you very much for your question and comment, Richard. I believe we're talking about the term persistent barking within a residential property. The funny thing about this current regulation is we actually enforce that regulation out of the City of Kingston's noise bylaw instead of the animal bylaw. Within the noise bylaw, persistent barking does not have a defined term or terminology, which leaves it to the officers to utilize their discretion, evidence collection, to really ask themselves if it meets the definition of noise within the noise bylaw. And off the top of my head, that definition is any sound that is unusual or disturbing to persons. So there's those standards of evidence that the officers might have to achieve before they can go forward on a persistent barking violation. I think we, in our internal discussions, we have definitely commented on how that can be a difficult thing for the public to understand, as it at times can be difficult for even the officers that enforce the rules to come up with the evidence and understand that process. One of our potential discussion points is moving the persistent barking piece from the noise bylaw into the animal bylaw and defining what persistent barking may be. That would provide some clarity to the public, that would provide clarity to the officers, and it would make it a lot more easier to enforce. So we are talking about this internally, Richard, and we will definitely look at making those moves that I just mentioned. Thank you very much for your comment.
Okay, with that in mind, we'll proceed to the comment period. So next slide, please. Okay, so attendees are now going to have a chance to speak about the Animal Control Bylaw. So again, raise your hand using the raise hand feature, and you'll be invited to unmute yourself, and you'll be given an opportunity to leave a 2-minute comment. So that's 2 minutes per individual to allow time for other individuals to speak. So staff are going to be listening, and we'll be transcribing all comments, but will not be responding to these comments. Again, this is just intended to allow more time to hear from the community. Comments are going to be included anonymously in the reporting out for this engagement. And again, so the raise hand feature is just on the lower bar through the Q&A. Comments can also be emailed directly to Derek O'Shea, again, our licensing and enforcement coordinator. So don't feel like this is your only opportunity. But with that in mind, we'll go ahead. Okay, and our first comment is from Paige. So go ahead.
Hi, thank you. So my comments regarding limit laws again, and limit laws are extremely difficult to enforce, and those who are irresponsible pet owners will likely evade the bylaws. In addition, limit laws will hurt those who comply by bylaw regulations and those who are responsible pet owners. Irresponsible pet owners will likely evade the bylaws, and it could head down a path that could put the animal's welfare into jeopardy, i.e. not seek out veterinary treatment to avoid implication for breaking a bylaw. It poses major implications for rescues and those wanting to help the vast amount of unwanted animals in our city. We feel that it's impossible to help the surplus of animals, which is a direct result of a lack of affordable spay-neutering alternatives and services, if there are also limitations in place without addressing that. This would also implicate and impact those who would want to foster, thereby further burdening our shelters, etc. So if we could just please consider everything with regards to what I've just said, it would be greatly appreciated.
Okay, thanks very much, Paige. Currently, we do not see any additional hands raised for comments. Oh, okay, and I do see 2 now. 4. Okay, excellent. So we'll just proceed down the list. So our next comment is from Councillor Osanek. So please go ahead when you're ready.
Great, thanks so much. Again, I want to speak to the limit laws, just like Paige has spoken to. So I was definitely surprised to see that, yes, limit of dogs, 60% of the people on the survey said limit the dogs, and then 62% said, yes, limit the cats. But then I think the more telling result is in the next question, that was, should there be a limit on the total number of pets per household? And that's where we saw it was totally split. You know, we saw people that were unsure what answer to give. I think that's more telling because we didn't ask the question of, you know, what about if you have dogs and cats? So let me, in the same households, let me just give this example, right? Like if we do go with a dog limit of say 3 and a cat limit of 3, then that gives somebody who has dogs and cats 6 pets in the household, whereas another household might only have cats. And then according to the survey, you know, say a 3-cat limit, that limits them to just 3 pets, whereas somebody who has dogs and cats gets 6. And so you can kind of tell I'm a cat person, right? No offense to dogs, but like that's where I see there's a flaw then of just purely using the results. And then going towards what Mary Shaw, you know, said, the very first question is like, we have to look at the data from the research studies that are out there and the papers and what you know, the Humane Canada recommends. We have to go further than just the what the survey results said. And I know that we've said that we're not going to just take the survey results and that's what the bylaw is going to be. We have to look at it holistically. And those are my comments. Thanks so much.
Okay, thank you very much. So moving down the list, we now have Allison. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Just for context, my name is Allison Mignot and I'm one of the co-founders of Kingston Animal Rescue. So I'm speaking on behalf of that organization and also my own personal opinions. I also wanted to address the pet overpopulation, pet limit concerns. As part of CARPO, I am against the implementation of a limit. I think that this type of bylaw and likely those who responded yes to it are thinking that it will address things like hoarding situations, which often have other underlying causes that a bylaw like this has not been shown to address. I think it's fairly arbitrary in nature. I've not read any research or had feedback from other shelters or rescue groups or other municipalities that suggest 5 pets is golden, 6 causes chaos. So I think that any number that's selected will be arbitrary and not based, not be evidence-based. I do also think it will penalize good pet guardians, of which I know many who would have probably far too many animals based on a bylaw like this. And I also think, coming from a rescue perspective, that it has the potential to harm shelters and rescues, both from the foster home perspective. People may be less likely or less inclined to volunteer to provide that very important assistance. And on the other hand, if there's something like, a process whereby rescues can say, yes, this volunteer is actually working with us and therefore they're exempt, that creates an administrative burden for rescues and shelters and takes away really important volunteer and work hours that could be focused on rescuing animals. And I just think overall a bylaw like this is really focused on controlling versus preventing. And I think that animal welfare should fall on the side of preventing. So focusing on things like education and spay and neuter initiatives instead. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Next we have Dina, so please go ahead.
Oh, can you hear me?
We can.
Okay. I'm actually for a couple of things. First, when you were talking about feeding of birds and stuff, I'm pertaining to feeding of wildlife in general. I live down by Douglas Fleur Park and the KP Trail, and there's major feeding of the ducks, the geese, squirrels, chipmunks, everything. And it's led to many problems. At times you can see just hordes, especially of the geese and the ducks. And I have a service animal, and I'm also a wheelchair user. So one of the things that's gotten really bad over the last few years is you can't even walk, let alone drive a wheelchair along the KP Trail, because people are constantly feeding. And then, of course, they're going to the washroom and it's just covered. So for a lot of the summertime, you're not able to utilize the trail. And the amount of people that are feeding the wildlife, it's getting worse and worse all the time. And I really think, I know that there's not a bylaw in Kingston right now, but I think that there needs to be a feeding the wildlife bylaw, like in other cities. I know it's not a provincial one, because it's getting really bad. And I know where I live behind it, there's like corn everywhere, and they're feeding like the ducks and the squirrels, and it's getting really out of hand here. And I know other parts of the city it is too. So I think that that's something that really needs to get looked at. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next we have Jason. You can go ahead, Jason.
Hi, how are you? Thank you very much. Can you hear me okay?
We can.
Okay, I'm going to try and go quick. I spoke to the city. First of all, I own the local pet value franchise in Kingston, my wife and I. I'm also a current member of CARPO and a past board member of the Kingston Humane Society. I have some background. I spoke to the city back in 2003, which was the last time that formal pet limits were proposed. And at that time, the mayor told the council that more people had called in and wrote the city in opposition to a limit on domestic pets than had even spoken up about the smoking ban bylaw, which was a huge hubbubaloo at the time. I would like to bet that many of the people who voiced concern or wanted pet limits did so probably assuming that the rescues in the KHS would be in favor of this issue. They probably felt they were answering in a way that would help. If there was consultation that had made with the Kingston Humane Society or the rescue groups earlier in the process, and we had been able to put out a statement 3 days before the survey ended, you might have got a different skew to your results. People might have been thinking they were doing the best thing, not realizing that many of the experts don't feel that pet limits help with regard to irresponsible pet ownership. We need to reward good behavior and encourage responsible pet ownership, and one of those things is purchasing a pet tag. Specifically, that ID tag helps you get pets home fast without having to get into the shelter system. So less ID means a harder time getting pets home, and less people purchasing pet tags, I think actually goes against responsible pet ownership. 100% of the rescue groups in CARPO were against limits on dogs and cats, and I said earlier that I think this is really important. Thank you very much. I'm glad that you're going to add that. I think there is already legislation in place to deal with irresponsible pet owners, whether that person has one dog or it's a hoarding situation. There are care and control laws on the books. I want to thank the city for these opportunities to come and get involved. I look forward to participating in the next steps, and I 100% agree that the solutions to pet overpopulation is so important. I look forward to working with CARPO, the Humane Society, the city, the community to work towards better access for affordable spay and neuter and mobile solutions. It is very important to this community. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Rebecca. So please go ahead.
Hi, my name's Rebecca. I'm a current sitting member of CARPO. I'm a past, been on the board of the Humane Society. I'm also, our family is a regular foster for a few different rescues in town. So at any given time, we could have anywhere from 5 to 6 cats on top of our own 2 cats that we own just on a temporary basis. Like all the other previous CARPO members that I mentioned, I have also agree with them that pet limits are not productive in terms of they're hard to enforce. You end up possibly punishing good pet owners. It also puts, like I think Allison mentioned, puts a burden on rescues If you exempt fosters, for example, from this limit, and then you're going to have a whole bunch of people that are pretending to be fosters so that they can keep their 4 cats when their limit is 3, I think it'll cause a lot of problems. I would personally like to see the city spend more time and money on spay and neuter initiatives to try and help with the overpopulation of pets in this city. I think that would be a better use of time and resources to have a plan to put low cost, high volume spay and neuter into the city. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We have a question from Zabe now. Please go ahead.
Yes, so I'm gonna want to emphasize, I'm speaking from a point of an environmental educator, person worried about sustainability, that in the education that the city promotes, there really has to be a broader awareness. The millions of cats that exist in North America alone, and the billions of birds that they kill. There also needs to be education about the health effects on humans of the amount of pets that we have, the amount of defecations that are going on public lands. You know, I appreciate the scoop and poop, but you know, you can go by many city parks and the garbage cans are still overflowing, let alone the stuff that gets washed down into the sewer and into our water. And very few people will understand the, you know, again, the research that's coming out on cats carrying and putting into our environment the Toxoplasma gondii and how that affects blindness, suicide rates, schizophrenia, depressions, all the things we're dealing with doubly now with COVID. So, you know, I think if there is issues with the, you know, people wanting to have pets, that there should be at least a balance in the amount of financial support that is given for wildlife to pets. And that maybe some of the people who are very pro pets that I'm hearing, you know, that don't want a limit on them, that there should be more educational programs to encourage people to understand how to train their cat to stay indoors if it has been an outside cat, how to create what they call catios, you know, fenced in outside areas, you know, that you can almost brag about, that you could show, and there's tours of those that go on. But there needs to be a lot more education that will balance out the fact that we have such a history of pets, but pets are causing a huge amount of impact on the environment, so that we can't deal with sustainability issues until we increase our awareness of the impact of these feathered and furry friends that we like.
Okay, thank you. We have a comment from Jessica. Okay, Jessica, go ahead.
Can you hear me okay? Perfect.
Yep.
So one of the things I definitely agree with everything on the Carpo board as well that has been mentioned. I do definitely support not doing the animal restriction bylaw. And one of the reasons that I had mentioned before that hasn't been mentioned yet here is just that I guess coming from a housing market point of view, I do have some concerns with even just how it could increase some discrimination against people that do have pets in our community, and also just any landlord that might actually use some of these as reasons to complain about their tenants or to prevent people from getting housing. And we already have quite a housing shortage, and it's one of the lowest vacancy rates in the province. So we already know about our housing issues, but if we cause any limits on households, there might be, I guess, repercussions with regards to discrimination, and people might, I guess, I don't know, I forget how I was wording it before, except for that I think that is a concern to be considered.
Okay, thank you very much. So seeing no other hands, I think we can move into the next step here. So I'll pass it off to Derek, who can walk us through the next steps for the engagement process.
Excuse me. Thank you, Mark. So the next steps we're going to be going through is after tonight, staff are going to begin work on drafting the new bylaw based on the survey results, the stakeholder feedback, and the information we've received here tonight. We are also open to receiving more information. So I think I've shared my email address a few times tonight, and I think it'll pop up again, but don't hesitate to reach out to me if you have more information you'd like to share, more research. I'd be happy to see it. The more information we get, the better we can make this bylaw. As Mark has mentioned throughout the presentation tonight, we will be doing a findings report that summarizes the questions and the comments we received tonight. It will be done anonymously, and we will be getting that posted on the Get Involved page next week, so it'll be up before Christmas. We also are going to commit this evening to sharing an update on the progress of the draft bylaw in mid-January 2021. So we will be doing that again through the Get Involved page. I'll also be reaching out to the stakeholders and people that I've already spoken to on this matter. It was identified that a lot of people would like to see what's coming in the bylaw, so we'll be able to share some progress updates. And lastly, I know there was a question from Jason about sort of what's the formal process here. So it is our intention to present a draft bylaw along with the staff report summarizing all the work we've done and the public engagement to the city's Arts, Recreation, and Community Policies Committee. They're meeting on Thursday, February the 25th in 2021. Assuming it passes there, it would then go to a council meeting in March. And that is the process there. Once it gets through committee, it's generally out of staff's hands. We can answer questions, provide more information, but it is up to our elected officials from there. And I think that Mark covers through sort of the next steps, although also I'll turn it back over to you and perhaps we can wrap things up.
Okay, great. Thanks, Derek. If you just want to jump over to the next slide. So just wanted to thank everyone for participating. So it's been great to hear from all of you about this project, and we appreciated having the opportunity to share with you about what we've been seeing through the survey and the engagement process. So one final thing, we have an evaluation poll that we'd like to ask you to complete before this online session concludes. I've just launched it now. And again, your feedback would be appreciated. This helps us as we go forward with our online engagement process. As Derek mentioned, the reporting back for this session will be posted on the Get Involved Kingston page for this project. If you've signed up to receive updates about this project, you'll be notified when it's live on the site. If you haven't signed up to receive notifications but would like to, please go to Get Involved Kingston and you can sign up there to receive notifications and updates from the project team. So thank you once again for taking the time to join us. We'll go ahead and leave the poll open until everyone's had an opportunity to complete it. But other than that, have a great night.